Gilles Deleuze and Albert Camus, A Comparison and Contrast. Gilles Deleuze and Albert Camus both engage with fundamental questions about existence, freedom, and resistance to oppressive structures, though they approach these themes through different methodologies and intellectual traditions. Each philosopher challenges established modes of thought, rejecting rigid systems that impose order at the expense of individual or conceptual freedom. Both emphasize movement, transformation, and the necessity of responding to the conditions in which one finds oneself, whether through philosophical inquiry or lived experience. Deleuze and Camus share an opposition to totalitarianism and any ideologies that seek or attempt to justify oppression, advocating instead for forms of resistance that prioritize human autonomy. Each critiques traditional structures that impose fixed identities or limit personal and intellectual freedom. Their work reflects a commitment to engaging with reality dynamically, seeing existence as something to be navigated rather than predetermined. In doing so, they both seek to affirm life, even in the face of meaninglessness or systemic constraints, promoting active engagement with the world rather than passive acceptance. Their individual philosophical inquiries also demonstrate a shared concern with the role of the individual within broader societal and other organizational structures. Both explore how external forces shape human experience, whether through social, political, or metaphysical frameworks. Each, in his own way, attempts to articulate paths for individuals to assert themselves despite these conditions, encouraging responses that maintain personal integrity and the rejection of imposed limitations. While their styles and emphases differ, Deleuze and Camus both independently contribute to a broader intellectual tradition that seeks to understand how individuals can engage with a world that often resists clear meaning or coherence. Their personal philosophies offer insights into human resilience, the pursuit of freedom, and the ongoing process of self-definition within larger systems of thought and power. Gilles Deleuze and Albert Camus, despite their shared engagement with themes of freedom, resistance, and the human condition, also diverge significantly in their philosophical frameworks, methodologies, and conclusions. Their contrasting approaches to metaphysics, subjectivity, and civic and political engagement reveal fundamental differences in their intellectual commitments and interpretations of human existence. Deleuze constructs a philosophy that embraces multiplicity, deterritorialization, and continuous becoming, rejecting fixed identities and hierarchical structures. His work, heavily influenced by Spinoza, Nietzsche, and Bergson, emphasizes immanence, fluidity, and the dissolution of binary oppositions. Deleuze critiques transcendental structures and absolute truths, instead proposing a system in which difference itself is primary, and reality is understood through dynamic, ever-changing assemblages, being neither existentialist or essentialist in nature. His rejection of representation in favor of process-driven thought contrasts with Camus' more concrete existential concerns, which remain tied to the human subject's struggle for meaning within an indifferent universe. Camus, grounded in existentialism and absurdist philosophy, focuses on the individual's confrontation with the absurd, the tension between human longing for meaning and the universe's lack of inherent purpose. His philosophy does not seek to dissolve the subject but instead explores the ethical and existential implications of this confrontation. Unlike Deleuze, who attempts to dismantle traditional notions of subjectivity and selfhood, Camus maintains the centrality of individual experience, positioning rebellion as an ethical response to the absurd. His thought remains more accessible and human-centered, while Deleuze's work operates at a higher level of abstraction, often removing the anthropocentric focus that defines much of existentialist inquiry. Their views on political and societal structures also diverge despite their common objection to abusive or authoritarian control of the polity or the individual. Camus, in his rejection of totalitarianism, upholds a form of ethical responsibility that demands both individual integrity and resistance to ideological extremism. His insistence on justice and moral clarity reflects his belief in the necessity of principled action within history. Deleuze, by contrast, approaches politics through the lens of desire, power, and the subversion of hierarchical systems, proposing a more radical, anti-structural approach to political resistance. While Camus seeks a balance between rebellion and ethical constraints, Deleuze advocates for the dismantling of restrictive frameworks, prioritizing deterritorialization as a means of overcoming imposed limits. These philosophical contrasts reveal a fundamental difference in how each thinker conceives of existence, agency, and the possibilities for meaningful and effective resistance against authoritarian rule. Camus' engagement with the absurd remains rooted in lived experience and ethical imperatives, while Deleuze's conceptual framework challenges fixed notions of identity, meaning, and reality itself. Their differing methodologies reflect distinct ways of grappling with the conditions of human existence, offering contrasting yet equally significant insights into the pursuit of freedom and self-definition. A complete and better understanding of the philosophical approaches of both Gilles Deleuze and Albert Camus is necessary if there is going to be any viable means to determine how best to ensure against authoritarianism in the introduction of systemically sustainable human growth and development. Their respective philosophies, though distinct in their metaphysical premises, provide essential insights into the conditions that enable authoritarian structures to arise and persist, as well as the means by which they may be countered through ethical resistance and structural deterritorialization. Only by engaging fully with both thinkers can one gain a deeper awareness of the dangers of ideological rigidity. The necessity of ethical rebellion, and the importance of decentralization and plurality in preventing the emergence of authoritarian control within any framework of societal human development. Camus, through his philosophy of the absurd, emphasizes the importance of moral integrity and the necessity of resistance against totalitarianism. His rejection of absolute meaning does not lead to nihilism, but rather to an ethical imperative to act against injustice. He argues that rebellion, when undertaken with an awareness of the common humanity shared among individuals, provides a means to resist systems that reduce people to mere instruments of ideology or power. His thought is critical for ensuring that the development of systemically sustainable human growth remains grounded in ethical responsibility, preventing the justification of authoritarian measures under the guise of progress or collective necessity. Without his emphasis on moral accountability, even well-intentioned initiatives risk devolving into oppressive structures that subordinate the individual to an overarching ideological framework. Deleuze, by contrast, offers a conceptual approach that challenges hierarchical structures and fixed identities, advocating for deterritorialization as a means of subverting authoritarian control. His rejection of representational thought and advocacy for rhizomatic structures, in which multiple, non-hierarchical connections exist between ideas, individuals, and institutions, presents a direct counter to the rigid, centralized control characteristic of authoritarian regimes. Deleuze's emphasis on multiplicity and fluidity suggests that sustainable human growth must avoid centralized mechanisms of enforcement and instead promote adaptive, decentralized systems that resist the imposition of absolute authority. His insights are critical for ensuring that systemic sustainability is not equated with static institutional structures but instead remains a dynamic and evolving process that continually adjusts to the needs of those it serves. Together, these philosophical approaches demonstrate that safeguarding against authoritarianism requires an integration of ethical responsibility with structural decentralization. A purely ethical rebellion without an understanding of power dynamics may fail to dismantle oppressive structures, while a focus on decentralization without ethical consideration may result in fragmentation or the emergence of new, unregulated forms of coercion. By synthesizing the insights of both thinkers, one develops a more comprehensive framework for ensuring that systemically sustainable human growth remains both structurally resilient and ethically grounded. This analysis further demonstrates that one cannot merely dismiss an entire argument even if presented by an individual or group that seemingly shares nothing in common with the one studied. Ideas, when examined within their proper philosophical and historical contexts, often contain valuable insights that transcend ideological divides. Both Deleuze and Camus arrive at their conclusions from vastly different intellectual traditions, yet their work intersects in the shared commitment to resisting authoritarianism. Understanding this intersection underscores the necessity of engaging with a wider range of more diverse perspectives, even those that may initially appear contradictory or oppositional to the stance of the individual actively seeking meaning or truth. The need to fully explore both sides of literally every debate becomes even more evident in this context, as meaningful resolutions to the many challenges of modern society require a comprehensive understanding of competing viewpoints. Dismissing ideas solely based on their association with a particular thinker or school of thought results in intellectual stagnation and weakens the ability to develop rational and effective solutions. The philosophical tensions between Deleuze and Camus do not render either irrelevant but instead provide a dialectical foundation upon which deeper insights can be built. By fully exploring both perspectives, one avoids simplistic dichotomies and gains a more nuanced understanding of how best to structure a system that is both sustainable and resistant to authoritarianism. Engaging with both these philosophies in their full complexity is essential for constructing a framework that prioritizes both ethical responsibility and systemic adaptability, as should always be the case when seeking to have a broader and more subjective understanding of any truth. Only through a rigorous examination of diverse intellectual traditions can one develop the necessary tools to ensure that systemically sustainable human growth does not become an avenue for new forms of coercion and control.
Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below. Music by Hatman.